Hello and welcome. This is Enrico E. Manalo with another episode of Intentionally Act Live. I'm joined today, of course, by all of my colleagues except for Octavia and Tayla. And Tayla, unfortunately, has is flying somewhere, and her flight has been delayed 6 times. So, if any of you are out there listening while you are traveling, I hope that there are no travel delays on your end. Today, what we're going to talk about is actually one of our core values. So, we're all familiar with the concept that the customer is always right. And for those watching, in what ways have you seen this attitude of the customer always being right lead to disrespecting the humanity of others? So, if you'd like to add that into the comments, we'll be happy to respond. Dr. Martin, what made you decide to include client care as a core value for all ACEs?
Good afternoon, Rico. So it was twofold. One, I think, is about how we engage with clients to make sure that we stay curious, make sure that we don't look down on people because they're not as far along in their journey as we are or as we would like them to be, but also that we respect our value of collective care within client care.
Got
Um,
it.
and that we're not sacrificing our dignity for the sake of a dollar, um, and that we're holding ourselves accountable, and we're holding our clients accountable to showing up in the ways that we know support advancing racial equity in within the context of DEI work.
Yeah, thank you so much for adding that clarity. And for anybody watching, if you're curious about our other values, you can check those out on our website. And we've actually done 2 episodes on our values before. So one being collective care, which Dr. Martin just mentioned, but we also did an episode on practicing what we preach. And so if you take a look at these episodes together, then you might get a much deeper sense of what we're all about. So now to pivot into our questions, I'd like to model a little bit of our organizational culture for everybody, which is how we check in with one another, or to link that back explicitly to the values. This is an aspect of collective care. So, Team All Aces, how are you doing today? For real, for real. And Maddie, since you are to my left on screen, I think I'll start with you.
Thank you so much for asking, Rico. I am actually doing pretty well today. I have been sick this entire past week since last Friday. Today is the first day that I felt pretty good. And I think having to wake up and make myself look a little nicer to come to the show definitely helped with that. So thank you for scheduling this, Rico.
Oh, of
Um,
course. And I understand you had some struggles with some coffee filters earlier. But,
Yes, I do not endorse the Signature Market Target coffee brand filters. Do not endorse those. They will fall through and you will be very frustrated for like 25 minutes.
excellent to know. Thank you, Maddie. And who are you passing this to?
I will just keep going down the line and pass it to Stephen.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, all laces. I'm doing well. It is Friday, and for some strange reason, I always love Fridays. Who knew? How am I doing for real? For real, I'm gonna be completely honest. I am very sore today. So yesterday was leg day at the gym, and after that was also basketball. So deadlifting for an hour and then going and running up and down a basketball court for the next two. I'm not sure why I thought that I'm still this young, teenager that can just do all this stuff and just be fine, and now I'm paying the price for it today. But that's okay because I just plan to sit around and play with the kids and watch football over the weekend. So I will figure out a way to survive. But I'm doing well though. Very happy to be here.
So, in the spirit of collective care, though, Stephen, and for everybody watching, Stephen really enjoys working out, and he can lift a lot of weight. That said, there have been times over the past year where you've gone back into working out and said that you were going to go hard, and then you got hurt. So, I just want to make sure: are you taking care of yourself?
I am. I'm easing my way back into it.
Okay,
Thank you,
good to
Rico. I
hear.
appreciate it.
Of course, that's what it's all about, right? So, who would you like to pass it to?
Keep the trend going. Janeen, how are you today?
All right. Thanks, Stephen. I am well. I started my day off with a furniture delivery that I've been waiting for since September.
Wow.
So my ottoman finally arrived at 7 a.m. this morning. So I wasn't happy about the 7 a.m., but I'm happy that I finally have my ottoman. So I'm great today. I'm excited. I'm counting down to the holidays. Feeling good.
Fantastic. So just in time to put your feet up as we go into collective care weeks, I hear.
Yeah.
But just to probe a little bit, Janeen, and for those who don't know, and why would you? Janeen recently had some surgery on her hand and is actually undergoing some physical therapy. So just want to check in on that.
Oh, thanks, Rico. Yeah, today I'm feeling good. Physical therapy is, I said the other day, it's the hurt that hurts so good. It's painful, and people think when you go to physical therapy, you just get massages. No, that is not true. They work you really hard. But I know that in the end, it means that my hand will be functioning almost back to normal, so I can take the pain for now. And yeah, it's hard work, but I'm grateful for. I love my physical therapist. She's wonderful.
Great. Who are you passing it to, Janeen?
I'll pass it to Dr. Martin.
Okay, so today I am physically tired and mentally tired, but spiritually very well, and emotionally very well. So today we got a request from one of our partners on the nonprofit side. So we have a nonprofit called Next Leadership Development. And some of the work we do on that side is to help support the survival needs of people with the goal of connecting them to thriving. And we received a request from one of our partners for 5 families of returning citizens, which is the language of people coming home from prison. And so there are 5 families who needed supplies and needed resources to support their families. And we were able to get a bunch of stuff over to them, some gift cards and personal protective equipment, masks and hand sanitizer, cleaning products and things like that. So that's how I spent my morning work time when I was supposed to be doing other stuff. But it was worth it, and glad that we were able to support those families. So feeling really, really, really spiritually and emotionally good about that.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. And I do just want to mention for people who will be watching this episode that not only is Dr. Martin the CEO and founder of All Aces, not only does she have a number of speaking engagements and is also leading Next Leadership Development Corporation, but she also does mobile vaccinations or is involved with mobile vaccinations. I don't think, Dr. Martin, you do that yourself because as far as I know, you're not that kind of doctor. But there are a lot of things that Dr. Martin does that I think actually we could do whole shows on. So she does a lot of good.
Thank you, Rico.
Well, thank you. I mean, you're the one doing this stuff, so thank you.
And I'll pass it to Moses.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. I'm doing for real. I was a little exhausted. Had a long week this week. Dealing with some familial issues and some illnesses. My daughter's been sick this week, so just trying to get her back up to speed and back to school really is what up to speed means, meaning out of the house. So looking forward to the weekend and looking forward to this meeting today and talking about client care especially and how that relates to collective care, which we have coming up soon. So I like how they both inform each other. And I will pass it to Jennifer.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm feeling pretty well. I am currently daydreaming about lunch because I'm hungry. I don't know what I'm going to have for lunch, but I'm daydreaming about it. I'm based in Baltimore, Maryland, and so I'm looking forward to actually coming home this weekend, home being Boston. So I need to prep for that because I've done nothing to prep for that. But looking forward to seeing fam and community as the holidays approach and spending time with loved ones. So yeah, feeling well.
So, Janifa, in your daydreams, where is lunch taking you? What is lunch in your daydreams?
Lunch. So I definitely a multi-course thing. It has to start off with soup. I'm really desiring something warm and cozy like that, you know. But I don't know what else to accompany the soup. Something savory for sure. That's all I can say for now.
Well, that's a pretty good start. And with that, let's move into our questions. So, we're talking about client care today. And one thing that I'm really curious to hear from the whole team is how has the importance of client care surfaced in the course of our work? Or, for those of us who are newer to the team, perhaps reflecting on previous work experiences where client care was not a value. And where client care was not present, how did that impact the work?
I can start. I'm a newer member of the team. So, in a previous life, I was a digital strategist and worked on product development. And we built a product that kind of became a Frankenstein monster because we listened to what the clients wanted. So they just kind of just said, like, we want this and we want that, and we built it. And what it did for the humanity of the team was it really impacted their morale because they were building something they didn't really believe in. They didn't feel like it was good quality. And then the clients actually didn't get good service in the end. And so what changed was we had to decide to, instead of saying, okay, we'll give you what you want, we had to start actually having conversations with our clients and asking them, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What is it that you need? And then we would go and figure it out instead of starting with the solutions from their end. And we ended up with a much better product, and the team was much more happier with the work they were doing. They felt good, they felt proud, and it really impacted the quality of work going forward and the happiness of the team.
Wow, I really love that example, Janine. So thank you very much. I think right there we can definitely see some of what Dr. Martin was saying at the top. But it also brings to mind that episode of The Simpsons where Homer is asked to give feedback to a car company, and so he ends up with like this monstrous invention. It's got like a bubble top, and it's super expensive, and everything like that. So, of course, in consulting and, our audience, some of us, a large part of our audience are consultants or practitioners themselves. We might not be delivering a product in the way that, the car manufacturers in The Simpsons were trying to deliver a physical object. But nonetheless, I think it's worth noting that in Janine's example, and in consulting services, if people had the answers to their questions, then they wouldn't be seeking out our services to begin with. So, kind of balancing that expertise against the needs and the wants of the customer, while preserving our own human dignity and theirs in the spirit of collective care is deeply important. So I'm just kind of curious for others. Are there other examples of how we've seen client care show up in the work or not?
Yeah, so and thank you, Janine. That was an awesome example. I Client care is kind of from what I've come to learn and know, is very much like going to the doctor, and we're always going and saying, like, we know what's wrong with us, and then we try to give ourselves the remedies, and suddenly we still we feel worse. And then we go to the doctor, and what they're telling us is something completely different. And even though a lot of times we don't want to listen. They know what they're doing. We have to put our trust and faith in them to give us the correct remedy. And that shows up a lot with working with our clients, because a lot of times what they're saying is, things like, we don't know what we don't know, but there's still part of that, the human nature that's like, you know what, I can still fix this. And so having the space, the ability to give trust and earn trust and say, hey, believe in what we're doing, and this is the route we need to go, is part of that that collective care, because at the end of the day, it is a collective group effort, and it can't just be well, this worked this one time, and this we know that this will work for everybody. It doesn't work like that. So
it's like we can't be prescriptive. Is that what, like, we can't be cookie cutter about this, right?
It's impossible, because no human being is the same, so we all have individual needs and wants too, and they say we can't just say, well, this works for you, Enrico, so Moses, this is going to work for you too, because, well, we were talking about food, Jennifer, see, now I'm hungry, so thank you, but Enrico, you might want soup, and Moses, so you might want a syrup sandwich. I don't know.
I'm gonna leave that there. Others from the PM team, thoughts?
Yeah. Oh, am I?
Oh, Moses, you have to mute yourself. There you go. Go ahead, Maddie.
Is it okay now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, kind of following what Steven said, I just wanted to add that before working at All Aces, I had worked a retail job for like 3-4 years, and we had a list of things to say to exactly what to say to a customer that would come in and have a specific complaint or have a specific question. Like, we would have scripted answers on what to just flat out tell them. And to our own expense, it basically roll over whatever they wanted. Like, it was fine, And so that was definitely something that was deeply ingrained in me after working there for like 3 to 4 years. And I just want to say that I learned a lot from Janifa coming into the PM team with actually how to just sit down and talk to someone and do what Steven is describing, and learn what their needs are and how we can work together to accomplish the goals, opposed to just rolling over and being like, yes, you're right, do whatever you want. So thank you, Steven, for putting that metaphor out there. And thank you, Janifa, for teaching me all of that.
And I'll just add at this point that everything exists on a spectrum. I say that a lot. But in the other pieces, there are also clients who just want us to do everything for them, or potential clients sometimes. And we say no, where they're just like, write this thing for us, and we want you to tell us how to do these things. And it doesn't work that way either. To Steven's point, it's a relationship, it's a partnership. And although we are content experts, they're the context experts. And so we need both in order to do racial equity work justice. And so wanted to highlight that, and then also say that, in some specific examples of ways that we've had to practice client care, it goes both ways, right? There are times where the client is asking for things that, from our experience, we know doesn't quite work or won't have the intended impact. And being able to help them to see that and leverage our communication skills and leverage our patience and curiosity and all of those things. But we also have clients who sometimes I think don't always respect the expertise as well. And so and having to really remind them, like, why they even spending money with us, right? Like, if you have all the answers, then that means you don't need us. There's no point in us being here. And yes, it's money, but that's a disservice to the work. And the last thing I'll say is also when clients are feel like they don't know anything. Like they're
Mm.
like, I don't know what I'm doing. We don't where we and so really helping folks to see their power. And that although they might not know all the right words and things like that, but they understand their organization. They understand some of the challenges that they've had. They have a level of um, contextual expertise that I think they underestimate, and sometimes it's helping them to build up their um, uh, confidence, but
Mm.
earned confidence, um, in helping them to be able to take this work in house. Because the goal is not for us to live in an organization, right? The goal is that they're able to build their own capacity to keep moving the work forward, and that's ultimately the best place. And so, really helping clients to get there.
So hearing you say that, Dr. Martin, and thank you very much for all your responses, everybody. Um, what's coming to mind for me is I remember when I was training, getting lifeguard training, and one of the things that people said to me was, "Don't jump in to save somebody who's drowning unless you're willing to perhaps drown yourself," which I thought was a weird thing to say in the context of lifeguard training because the whole thing is about not drowning. But uh, I think to that point, when people don't know and they're feeling insecure, sometimes they project that insecurity or that uncertainty onto the people that they've reached out to help them, which I think is kind of an odd thing. Um, but it also kind of brings to mind questions around like, well, why is it so important for us as racial equity practitioners, and not just us, this team, but racial equity practitioners as a whole, to interact and to build relationships with their clients in a way that preserves not only the client's dignity and humanity, but our own?
So I think oftentimes when clients do come to us to support their organizational work, they're thinking about it through the lens of, you will be giving us a list of things to do. If not, you will be doing a list of things to fix our racial equity challenges. But I think in walking out this value, which includes in preserving our own dignity, we're actually demonstrating to our clients what it means to do racial equity work in real time, right? So in me developing a relationship with a client and me helping a client understand if I've been harmed, that I've been harmed and why I've been harmed, that is literally a learning opportunity for the client. And it's reframing for the client what it means to do racial equity work well, right? And hopefully a point of reference for that client to then do the same thing with the people they're working with. And so we're loosening ourselves from this idea that racial equity work is this list of things to check off, and more of like, oh, racial equity work is actually something I can be embodying, and racial equity work can be the approach to how I do these things. So if
Mm.
I am working on my operations and my organizational structure, there's an approach I have to utilize to do that work well, right? There's a way I have to work with my colleagues to achieve these desired goals. And that includes ensuring that everybody's dignity is intact, right?
Mm.
Including my own. So, yeah, I think just walking out this value is actually demonstration of what we mean by doing the work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it also sounds like part of what you're saying, Jennifer, is this helps us to create and maintain space for people to test out, to try out, and Yeah, to get more experience with the core equity opportunities, which again are knowledge, communication, and relationships. Another part of what I'm hearing you say, though, is that by conducting ourselves in this way that preserves everybody's humanity and dignity, um, it helps us to get out of this. And this is a trap that everybody falls into of simply going through the motions and falling into the trap of checklist diversity. And if you're not quite sure what I mean about checklist diversity, we actually did an episode with Andrew Francolanza earlier this year. So if you'd like to check that out, please go to our YouTube page and you can find it there as well. I saw a number of team members nodding along to what Jennifer was saying. So I wonder if anybody has anything they'd kind of like to add on to that. And if not, I guess that's cool.
I'll just share that part of this too is us practicing these skills too. So advocating for ourselves is an important part of racial equity and social justice as individuals, and then in the context of organizational settings. And so this, what we're talking about in terms of preserving our dignity with clients is, to use Jennifer's language, is an embodiment of racial equity and social justice, and being able to let a client know that not only have they caused harm, but we're naming it, and that we actually need to talk about it, and there needs to be some action taken in order to address the harm. And I think it's hard. Not I think, I know it's hard to do. Have had to do it on many occasions, really kind of calling people in and out, and holding ourselves accountable to doing that, because it's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to just go along with things and not say anything. But that wouldn't be doing ourselves any justice, and it wouldn't be doing the organizations that we're trying to partner with a good service. So I just add that to the context.
Yeah, and as you're talking, Dr. Martin, I've definitely felt that pressure before. Like it would be easier not to address harm or to have those hard conversations. But then what I've noticed is later on, actually, it becomes harder, right? As that relationship continues, it becomes harder and harder and harder. And as many on the team know, one of my interests is in organizational silence. And that very much is a pathway towards people not wanting to contribute or to share ideas with others in their organizations. What I'd like to pivot to next is in the work of all ACEs.
Rico, I think before you move on, Stephen wanted to add something.
Sorry about that, Stephen. Go ahead.
No worries. Thank you, Dr. Martin. I just wanted for our listeners to understand that everything we're talking about is a skill set. This is not something that just happens overnight. It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of practice. Maddie, just using the example you said earlier, that before there were things that you didn't know or didn't understand, and coming here was something, it's the educational piece of learning that. So we practice this on a regular basis within our own organizations before we go and try to teach it to everybody else that that comes in and works and partners with us. So it's not something, like I said, that will you just magically wake up and you're like, oh, you know what, I can say this now because I see it, I identify, I'm going to speak on it. It's not that simple, because it's an internal struggle, because again, most people don't enjoy conflict. And Rico, as you say, conflict's not always necessarily a bad thing, but to stand up and say, hey, this is a thing and we have to deal with it. It's human nature to be like, you know what, maybe next time I'll get to it.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Stephen. And to that point, because as Stephen just mentioned, we do this on a regular basis. It's something that we have to keep coming back to and to hold ourselves and one another accountable for. How has this played out? Obviously, we can't name names or anything like that, but in the course of our work, having those explicit developmental conversations with clients to maintain Team All Aces collective care, what happened?
Yeah, so I will start this part. It is amazing to see in real time when it happens. We were working with a client, and there was some things that happened, and I explicitly remember when Dr. Martin said, "Before we go any further, we're going to have a meeting and we're going to talk about this." And some harm had been done on both sides, and it was causing friction and a rift to the point that the work wasn't actually moving forward. And so we had to take a literal pause and we talked it out. And after that, after everything was out on the table, we identified what the issues were and what was holding us back. It was only until then we were able to move forward, and it progressed and it flourished, and it seemed to be it made people more open to the idea of maybe we need to do things a little bit different than even we even thought, and it was more accepting of the process that was being developed.
Yeah, thank you for that, Stephen. I definitely think that. Oh, one second. Sorry about that. But yeah, I think sometimes when people hear holding people accountable, it's this very kind of their ideas of punishment or real negativity, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? It's again, a lot of it is about the approach. So thank you very much for surfacing that. Others, would you care to jump in on this point?
I
Moses?
can jump in, but Moses. Oh, sorry.
Sure, thank you. Just really quick, I was going to say the first time I was witness to one of these calling in, calling out scenarios in a meeting, it was, to be honest, for myself, a little awkward. I was like, wow, Dr. Martin is really about this dignity life. You know what I mean? It's not just or a value that's written somewhere or that's repeated 3 times a day. And I think, like Stephen said, it does show to the client that this isn't only something that is on an invoice and is on something that we're trying to teach, but it's something that we value and we want you to value. Ultimately, we want the client to walk away and have that instilled in their meetings and for that to trickle down to other folks that they meet.
Thank you for that, Moses. So who's up next?
So earlier, Dr. Martin shared the importance of us advocating for ourselves, and I just want to touch on like the role of leadership here. So in my personal experience, what I have reaped the most from is from Dr. Martin making room for my leadership. So in the instances where we've had to do this call in, call out scenario, and I've been the one who has been harmed, Dr. Martin has made it a point not to step in and do the advocating, but rather emphasize that she is here to support me in advocating for myself. And that has been pivotal to my own leadership and in real time experiencing clients receive that type of feedback and also respect my leadership in leading their contract or their work with us, right? So if there are any leaders, supervisors, managers, what have you, listening in on this, I think it's important for us to take note of how our advocacy of those we support look like. It's one thing to advocate for someone who's not in a room, but can we make more opportunity to create the space for those who have been harmed to actually advocate for ourselves and for people to witness that is what we're doing, to really reinforce the leadership that we all have, right? Which I think Dr. Martin is really. I think this is really important to her. Like, although she is the leader of our organization, we all are leaders here, and so emphasizing to our clients that is something that's part of our values.
So, Jennifer, thank you very much for that example. It was very much on my mind as we were putting this show together. And I'm really curious. So, you talked about what happened and kind of how it played out, but how did that feel for you as the person who was on the receiving end of harm and still having to lead that project?
Yeah. If the conversation did not happen, I would have been miserable leading the project. And so I think a couple folks have mentioned this already. Like, we have to do the uncomfortable to get to the place where we're able to lead this work with grace and honestly with joy, right? Because the project in of itself, it was within a field that I'm interested in, and so I very much desire to enjoy it. But if I continued on with, not having that conversation and not stepping into the icky stuff, I think it just would have been miserable all around. And then in terms of just like overall, being able to step into my leadership in that way was empowering. And so I think it also just reinforced for me what this journey as a leader in this space will continue to look like, and what I can be taking advantage of,
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for that. The last part that I'll kind of probe on, just so that our audience has kind of more of the context. How did the rest of that contract play out for us from your perspective?
I think it played out well. I mean, we received great feedback by the end of the project. We received our accolades, I guess, from the client by the end of the project. And I think one way we can way that we can measure our success, for lack of better terms, is like the desire for clients to either engage in another contract with us or continue to engage in work with us. And this is a client that was the case, right? Like, they didn't necessarily come on for another contract, but they certainly engaged with us in other ways in the business. So yeah, I think continuing in the cycle, right? The business cycle for us is a testament of our success with a client, and that very much did happen.
Yeah, definitely. And I do very clearly remember that, in fact, they did want to continue a relationship with us. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they were after something that we actually don't exactly offer, which is why we didn't end up continuing on with them, right?
Right, yeah.
And I just want to flag that Maddie earlier had unmuted herself, but didn't actually get a chance to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Martin.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I guess the moment has kind of passed. I just had something.
We can bring it back.
I had something to add. When you had surfaced this piece around accountability and holding our clients accountable, but also holding ourselves accountable, and that how sometimes the word accountability brings up like fear, like you think of punishment. And I just wanted to mention that I was in conversation with Janifa last week, and we were talking about, well, I was surfacing that I felt like my learning was kind of stalling and I didn't really know where to go and what to do. And she gently asked me, well, have you been reading the resources you send to clients as you send them to clients. And I was like, not all the time, no. So it was a very like gentle, just like calling me in and saying, okay, everything that you are desiring is here. You just have to do it and put that effort in. And she was holding me accountable, and it was very kind. So that's all I wanted to add.
I appreciate that example. I know in my previous experience as a teacher, one of the things that drove me a little bit up the wall was that when I would give out papers or handouts, right? Before waiting, like the students would not wait for instructions; they would just start reading the paper, right? And then there's this curious thing in our line of work where, and this happened to our team too, right? So people will send instructions in email attachments, and then the recipients end up, for whatever reason, maybe not reading them as closely or going through that thing. So it's very hard to keep ourselves accountable, which I think also speaks to the power of both collective care and client care, and certainly practicing what we preach. So thank you for not letting the moment pass, Maddie, and getting that in there. Really appreciate that. Any other thoughts before we move on to our next question? No, all good. Okay. So, how do you see more people holding client care as a core value having an impact on implementing DEI, anti-racism, and racial equity work? So, another way to think about this is if within our field we see more practitioners, more firms like ours adopting the value of client care, what effect might that have on people who are seeking out our services?
I think in addition to, oh no, actually, Jennifer, you go ahead. No.
Caught.
I know. I try to. So, not answering your question directly, but okay. So I think in the wider ecosystem, right, of racial equity work and those who are doing it, I think the turnover between organizations and the people that they hire will be reduced, right? Because often we hear from new clients that they worked with the previous organization, they worked with the previous firm, consulting firm, or what have you, or independent consultant, and here's what went wrong. And a lot of the times, like, the things that went wrong didn't necessarily have to do with the actual deliverables that the firm or person executed. It really just had to do with like our what we call our core equity opportunities, right? Like whether the consultant was successful at really being intentional about developing a relationship with that organization and how they approached like the context expertise of the client, right? So I think we would see a reduction in that turnover, and ultimately more how people do the approach people take for DEI work, for anti-racism work would be more consistent, and ultimately the impact that organizations would have would be attained a lot more quicker than they are, right? Because I as an organization, or we as an organization, wouldn't have to go through 3 consultants before actually achieving results, right? We would work with that one consultant and like have enough to move forward and as we always say, like make transformative change like more attainable, right? More feasible. So yeah, I think wider ecosystem wise, there would be a ripple effect that would benefit us.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that adopting this as a value would create perhaps more opportunities to really work on relationships. And a lot of what we're doing in this work is helping and supporting people in getting better at creating relationships. So it makes a lot of sense to me to start from the client and the vendor, right? If we don't have that kind of relational thing going on from the get-go, and that is part of the scope of the work, then that's kind of a breakdown right there. Yeah.
Right, because I mean, it's that relationship that allows the client to freely say, like, hey, this actually isn't going as we had expected, or something is off here, as opposed to wrapping up the contract and just saying, okay, we're not happy, let's go find someone else, and wasting resources, right? Essentially, because you're moving on to the next since you weren't happy with the previous. Whereas if that relationship is, or if we're actively committed to developing and cultivating that relationship and really leaning into this, finding harmony between our various expertise as vendors and as clients, there's opportunity here for us to improve the work or the deliverables that's expected of the work, as we move along, as opposed to attempting to follow through on something that we know isn't going to work from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And I just jumping in on that piece, building on that, Jennifer, thank you for that, because I think part of this is really understanding what a relationship is.
Mhm.
And to Stephen's point earlier, these are all skills, right? In relationships, building and sustaining relationships is a skill, and foundationally, and we're not really taught how to do it well unless we seek out opportunities to do that. So we might think we're building relationships when in fact we're not.
Mhm.
And if we layer on top of this kind of the racial equity, social justice work, a lot of times we come in with arrogance into organizations because we know all this stuff, and we're here to enlighten them and whip them into shape. And it's just so it's oppressive, right? Like we shouldn't
Yeah.
be perpetrating oppression while we're trying to help organizations undo oppression,
Right.
organizations. And so remembering that we started at a place, none of us knew all of these things from birth. It took a journey, it took time, and there's some privilege in that, and we're still learning. And if we have some humility in those facts, then it makes it easier to go into space with clients and build the kind of relationships that allow us to be successful because we're respecting their humanity. We're not judging them because they don't know all the stuff that we know, and being able to kind of really bake into our process modeling anti-oppression, and how to be a disruptor as a person and how to be disruptive as an organization.
Yeah, thank you both for those comments. I think one thing that many people are aware of is that even the word consultant has somewhat of a negative connotation in our culture, and not for no reason, right? Very much because of some of the dynamics that both you and Jennifer are talking about. If you'll recall the movie Office Space, there's the meeting with the consultants there, and it's kind of illustrative of how disconnected that arrogance that Dr. Martin is talking about, and perhaps how disconnected these outside service providers can be, especially when they come in thinking that they know all the answers. And to be clear, Office Space was a parody. It was totally satire, but Mike Judge has a great way of hitting very close to the bone. Anybody else like to weigh in here?
Yeah, just really quickly, I'd like to add on to something that Jennifer had touched on when she's saying how, organizations can retain their people. And I think I can safely speak for just about everybody here, and probably most of our listeners. We've all had that one job that, every day we went to work, we're like, man, I feel like I'm putting in more than I'm really getting out of it. And then, suddenly, 6 months to a year in, we're like, man, I got to go to work again. And with collective care, it gives the freedom to understand, to know that the person that you're working the closest with actually cares about you as a human being. And I feel like a lot of times that is lost in a lot of organizations. I can speak for myself. I worked in retail myself as well for a long time. And it was, for a while, you're doing great. And they're like, they love you. And then as soon as your numbers or something drops off, they're like, so what are you going to do something for me? I'm like, well, wait a minute. What about the 3 months that I was like literally, carrying the store, and we just forgot about that. And, they're not asking, how's your son doing, or, how's your family? It's, how much money have you made with that? I'm like, at the end of the day, like, how much money I've made for this company doesn't really do anything for me. So I'm obviously just a commodity at the time that's good, sometimes great, other times. And, what's my real value here? And so with that being said, really checking in on your people and really caring about them besides, the dollar value that they bring really goes a long way. And, that can turn into, what, I might be able to give a little bit more because I know that the people I'm working with are willing to give me a little bit more as well. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that, Stephen. And I think that really speaks to our current moment. People are calling it the Great Resignation. But I think you've hit on exactly some of the feelings that many essential workers, other people who are involved in that Great Resignation are experiencing, right? Why would we want to continue working for people that don't value our humanity, especially at a time when so many of us are more vulnerable to things than we've ever been? Inflation is up. Coronavirus continues to mutate. We're under a lot of stress right now. And so I think something's got to give. So I wouldn't say that this is perhaps a panacea, a way of fixing everything, but I think it might be a good place to start. And so in light of that, I'm curious to hear from the team. There might be people out there watching us who are kind of wondering, like, wow, client care sounds fantastic, but where do I start, right? How do I start putting this into practice today? I mean, I guess you could join All Aces, but
So step number one, join All Aces. But I think, so there's two parts to this. So one is that this concept applies across all organizations. So like we've been talking about it in the context of consultants, but it applies in everywhere. And as consultants, I think the first place to start is to have a good understanding of who you are as a person, what your challenges are, where your strengths are, and to embrace it all, and not place judgment on each of those pieces. So that's something that's not directly related to racism or social justice, but is foundational to our humanity and being able to manage ourselves better. And embracing all parts of who we are, including the things that we may not like because society or other folks have deemed it a negative. Because then that allows us to, when we're with a client, able to recognize, I am a person who, I'll use myself as an example. I am a person who can sometimes get irritated with people when it feels like they're not really present, right? Like that, it can be irritating to me. And so in knowing that about myself, when I'm in meetings with clients and they feel distracted, instead of me getting frustrated, I know that, something else is going on, and I'm just going to ask, and that way I won't feel frustrated. Right. And so it's helpful to other people, but it's also like me, having a better outcome for myself as well. And so part of this starts with us understanding ourselves and our challenges and our strengths. And then the other piece is, I think, being able to get clear about how you want to be in the space with clients. Right? So what are the outcomes that you want to achieve, and how do you want to achieve those outcomes with clients, and how will we do it in a way that will respect everyone's dignity and humanity, that will accomplish the organizational changes that are necessary, that we're really trying to accomplish, and how do we do it in a way that will model, right, that we're modeling these things for folks. So that's what I would say.
Oh, that's great. So I think one way that I'm seeing is, well, we all send a lot of emails. So instead of reaching for the as per my last email, perhaps one thing we could do is kind of model the way that the interaction would go. And certainly, I think, rather than doing the snapping thing, hello, hello, that kind of thing, then maybe we can be checking in with people to kind of understand what's going on with them, so that we can get to a place where our relationship can flow a little bit more easily. Other thoughts on this topic?
I was just going to add, I love what you said, Dr. Martin, about, looking and starting with yourself, and also maybe going that extra mile and thinking about bringing this up with your leadership team, within your organization, because it's great if you start modeling it as well, but wouldn't it be great if this was a value that you adopted across your organization? So how can you, learn more about client care and bring it up to your leadership as an idea to help bolster the values that you already are doing within your organization?
Yeah, definitely. I think, Stephen, go ahead.
Sorry. Just to reiterate what everybody said, the best way personally is to live it and do it yourself before trying to have anybody else do it. Because it's very noticeable when you're trying to tell somebody else, oh, you should be doing this and this is how you do it. And then they turn to look at you and they're like, you don't live that way. So if you don't do it, how could it possibly be helpful to me? So I take that as something very personal. Like I try to, everything that we do here at All Aces, I have tried to incorporate that and just how I deal with people on an everyday, regular basis. How I react to them. Dr. Martin, I appreciate you saying that, because that's something that's been a struggle for me, because somebody would do something that's irritating. I'm immediately like taking it personal, like, that it's because of me. And one thing I've learned is a lot of times it's really not. There's something else going on. And I have, as a human, I have to respect that. Number one, it's not always about me. And number two, if the roles were reversed, I would want somebody to give me the benefit of the doubt, to not just assume that, hey, you're just being a jerk today, So
Yeah, definitely. And, again, hearing echoes of what you said before, like, this is a skill. This is something that we have to develop competency in. And so people out there watching might be wondering, okay, so you've told me what this thing is, how I can start doing it, but how do I know that it's actually working?
So I am all for feedback. Of course, feedback in, the formal ways like surveys and whatnot, but also just feedback in real time. So the same way we intentionally check in with one another as part of leading into our value of collective care. What does it look like to intentionally lean into client care? And I think a piece of that is making space for the consistent pauses to ask the client, how is this landing with you? Is there anywhere we need to pivot? Is there anything that's surfacing as a challenge for you? What do we need to talk about right now, right? So to really get to understand how the client is experiencing us, right, as people, but also how the client is experiencing the work that we're leading within their organization. And I think the making it clear to the client that we are open for any type of feedback, right? Even if it's harsh feedback is also important. And so that may include actually saying it as well to, again, like just make that space, just make the space more one where the client feels comfortable enough to really, again, lean into what we're understanding as our value. And if I go back to what I mentioned earlier about the ecosystem, hopefully lead to them continuing the contract without, as opposed to, pushing through the contract with the intent on, hiring someone else after us, right? Because they weren't happy. So what does it look like to put it all out on air and let us know?
And part of what I'm hearing as you speak, Jennifer, is we have to be willing perhaps to, and you were saying this before a little bit, to embrace discomfort, but also to embrace the comfort of perhaps making ourselves a little bit vulnerable so that somebody else can feel comfortable enough to come in. I know that sometimes when I've tried new skills out, I've gotten hung up on, oh, this feels weird, but life is weird. And what I've noticed is sometimes when I tell people I'm going to try a thing, I hope it's new to me, but hopefully you can give me some feedback and just kind of lay it out there, as you say. Then one, it sometimes makes people laugh a little bit and feel more at ease, and then they're more willing to engage because they know that I'm not necessarily an expert, but I am trying to help them out.
Yeah. And, like, also, I think, again, holding ourselves accountable. So if we know that we've misstepped in some type of way, being honest about that and being like, hey, I'm noting that this particular experience shaped out in this way. It is not how we expected. It was, whatever. But I want to check in with you. How did that land with you? Right. Because oftentimes, again, the silence is because the space wasn't created,
Definitely.
Yeah. And Jennifer, to that point, I think there's this whole piece around conflict, Rico's favorite topic, that is a part of this, which is how conflict shows up in the relationship and how it helps to build stronger relationships, right? And our ability to navigate through it, our ability to talk about the hard things, to work through them together, and it will make everybody's experience better, right? And to the point of, well, how do we know if we practiced collective care well with a client? Affirmations to everything Jennifer said. And I want to kind of emphasize this piece around the almost like coaching, right? It's the difference between getting a annual evaluation and getting regular feedback and coaching every week. And that addressing things in the moment allows us to not let it fester and not let it drag everything down, as we mentioned earlier in the show. And so I think this knowing that we were able to talk about the hard things, including hard things that were hard to hear about us and the work that we're doing. Not just about the client, again, kind of tapping into our own humility, and being able to, at the end of the engagement, sense that the client had a good experience. right? And you know that. But in terms of, when they sign on a new contract, things like that, everyone can't do that because some people have very limited budgets. But when people are just energized and excited by the end of the contract, they're ready to go to the next step. They're ready to go to the next level. And I think that is a clear indicator beyond all the things that we've talked about, that we practiced collective care well with a client.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Dr. Martin. I think it's worth saying here that we've been talking about relationships a lot, but and just to be really clear, we can have relationships with people that we don't necessarily like very much. But what I will say is that if we look at the most durable relationships, even amongst people who don't particularly care too much for each other, when people have gone through some stuff together, some real hard stuff, there's a certain amount of respect that we can build from that. And in those relationships where people have been through a lot together, even if they look like they're bickering or arguing all the time, one of the things that I've noticed is that they still really respect one another. So I think that's also part of the aspect that we're talking about here. So I'd like to thank all my teammates for joining me today and for thanking the teammates who were not able to make it, because they're very much a part of how we embody client care as well. And this is, Janif is back. This is our last show of 2021. It has been quite the ride. 2021, who knew that it would be like this? And so what I'd like to check in with the team on is in 30 seconds or less, and I should probably just get rid of that 30 seconds or less part because I never make people stick to it. But what would we love to see come out of our work for 2022? Anyone can start.
I'll just quickly say in relation to client care, we would be seeing the client care and collective care principles that we practice kind of infect, for lack of a better term, our clients and the clients and communities that they deal with. So not only seeing us practice these values, but seeing them practice them with their community as well. I think that would show part of those values getting out to the greater.
Thank you, Moses. And just to emphasize, Moses means to developmentally infect, not the other terrible way. Others.
I can go and I can make it in 30 seconds. Oh, I'm sorry, Stephen.
Time.
Time. I just want more people to care and to embody this element of caring for other people in a developmental way, whether it's collective care, self-care, client care, just to actually be mindful and to care about your work and about the people that are around you. So
I love the directness of that, Maddie. Thank you.
Basically just kind of going off what my colleagues have said, just to continue to press upon the clients and honestly just the people we have everyday contact with to respect everyone's humanity and look at them as a person first and not just necessarily a commodity or somebody that can do something for you. Look at people as people and treat them accordingly.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stephen.
I can go next. We talked about some of this earlier, but understanding that this work isn't something that is you're gonna see change and switch overnight, that you really have to understand and be patient, and that there's a long game in this, and that this is deep work. And it takes time and resources and dedication, but it also takes patience. And that you're not going to just see that self-gratification in the next day. You have to work at it. It's a skill, as Stephen said, and you have to build those relationships, and that takes time. So don't get discouraged. Keep at it, keep working at it, and know that in the long term, it's really going to make an impact.
Wonderful. Thank you, Janeen. Anyone else?
For me, I would like to see more consistency in approach across the ecosystem of those who are working on the side of DEI practitioners and consultants and anything in between. Because I think that that the the more our approach is shared within the ecosystem, the more room there is for collaboration. And again, the less we as individual firms will hear about the harsh experiences that clients are having with those who haven't yet reached the moment of leaning into these type of values. And I emphasize haven't yet reached because there's always opportunity for growth and development.
Great point.
I'll just quickly add that it is my hope that people see the relationship between their personal and professional development and the organizational development. I think there's so much 30 seconds, Jesus. Shorthand, I think there's been a lot of messaging that, if you just change policy, then everything else will follow. And I think that that's partially true, and there's a larger context that sits within. And I think in the search for an easy button or a silver bullet, people grasp onto that, but will soon realize that it's more than that. That's why there's a whole field of sociology and psychology and organizational development and all of these things, because it's more complicated than that. And even in public policy, there are no easy ways to move the needle on the practices that we have and the laws that we put in place, and how we do things as a society. And so challenging us to not try to search for an easy button in this work and to start with the mirror.
Thank you for that, Dr. Martin. And I guess for me, what I've learned more deeply in being part of the team is that, we know that globally we're going through a pretty hard time right now. And if we think about the other hard times in our lives, in my life, certainly, most often it's the relationships that I have or have been able to build that have really gotten me through those hard times. And it's actually how I ended up on the team in the first place. So what I would love to see is by helping other people to see how we can relate to one another in ways that preserve that humanity. Hopefully, we're going to set ourselves up for more success in the future. And I know we could all use it at this point. So thank you very much once again to Team All Aces. This is Enrico E. Manalo for Intentionally Act Live. It's been a pleasure to be with you this year, and we will see you again next year. And we very much invite you to reach out and to connect with us on social media and to visit our websites and our online learning community, intentionallyact.com. And if you liked this content, then please do like and share. That's it for today. Bye.
Thank you, Rico. Happy holidays, everyone. Happy New Year.
Happy holidays.